They mad that I got hard. Now I'm on the top charts.
What's up, everybody? It's me, Aden, from the Never Broken Podcast, and I want to say thank you for tuning in to my newest episode featuring Anthony Arillotta. If you do not know who Anthony is, Anthony was the boss in the Geneves family. Now, he ruled New England. So when I say New England, I'm talking about Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, those states. He was the boss who handled it. You're going to hear about his business before he was even a made man, how he was making multi-millions a year. You're going to hear about once he became a made man, how his business escalated, and he went from making 3 to 4 million a year to 7, 8, 9, and 10. You're also going to hear about him and going to jail, his trials, his tribulations, and what happened when he finally walked away from the life and decided to cooperate and decided that he was going in a different route. You're going to hear what he's up to now. Anthony wrote a book called South End Syndicate, and it talks about his life. It talks about how he rose to prominence in the Geneves crime family. And I'm telling you what, it's one hell of a story. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and I also want to tell you to keep tuning in as we have new episodes coming, and we also have some big announcements coming that you do not want to miss. Here's how you will find my show on YouTube. One thing that I need you to do, I need you to hit that like button, I need you to hit the subscribe button, and I need you to tell your friends and tell their friends about this podcast. This podcast is by an everyday guy like myself, me, telling the stories that we all want to hear from mobsters, gangsters, police, veterans, you name it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today. My guest today really doesn't need an introduction. When we talk about Mafia podcasts, we always talk about the New York, the 5 families, but what some know about is the Massachusetts family, the New England family. And I'm sure you've heard of maybe of the Angello family, but today we're also going to hear about another family. I'm sitting with the former Geneves crime family of New England, Anthony Arillotta? Sorry, my bad. So really appreciate you sitting down with us. I know we've been trying to do this for a while, and just, really nice to sit with you here and talk about the things you did and, how the New England crime family sometimes gets left out. So, but we'll start off, with, welcoming you.
Mm-hmm.
So, where'd you grow up at, Anthony?
Right where we are right now, Springfield. South End is right here. And this restaurant that we're doing this interview in is in the, kind of like it is the South End of Springfield.
Okay.
So I didn't grow up, I lived here at times during my life, but this was the Italian section of us growing up, and this is where we hung out. And I actually lived down here for parts of my life.
Okay.
Right.
Now growing up, some people, they're born, their father or their uncle was in the family. So growing up, was your family involved in organized crime?
So my father was a hard-working man, fruit and produce, wine grape distributor, biggest in Massachusetts. But I did have family that was involved. My uncle Donnie Pepe was the driver for Big Nose Sam. He was the mob boss from the 30s to the 1984, and so he was my uncle. So he was always at my house. Some notorious gangsters, Big Nose Sam was was a notorious gangster, was at the Appalachian meeting, like notorious. And so my other uncle, my mother's brother, was an organized crime associate. My grandmother's brother was a Patriarcha associate with all the top dogs, Whitey Tropiano, Billy Grasso, that was his crew. And Al Bruno was like a distant cousin of mine on my mother's side.
Okay. So growing up, your family's in a produce, so I'm sure you're seeing, did you know who was who, in that life?
I didn't know who was who because as a young kid, you just heard about the Mafia. The Mafia had a huge presence in Springfield. A lot of Italians growing up, we knew who the Mafia was. The families talking about them, they're bad, they're good, they're this, they're that. And so, but they always got shown respect, and they were powerful individuals. And not till I got later on, as I was growing up, I started getting knowledge of like the structure of who the boss is, and and how it worked and things like on that level.
Okay, so your teenage years, when did you start to let's say, flirt with, being a good kid to doing some not so good things,
I was always a little wise guy growing up.
Yeah.
I always was in trouble fighting. I was always betting sports games ever since, like, I would say the first, second grade of school. So I was always a big sports gambler. And so was my father and my family. So I was always around that element. But I was always getting into fights. So I would say that was my first, brushes with the law were violence.
Okay.
But it was always fights. Like every
Yeah.
kid gets into it.
Yeah.
Our neighborhood fights their neighborhood, or the Italians fight the Irish, or like different areas and different sections fight each other. So it was like fights like that. It wasn't like breaking the law. It was just growing up wild, getting into fights, and it was all kinds of things like that. I didn't get into the money making schemes until like my later teens.
Okay.
And I didn't have to, because my family was middle class, and so I was I didn't have to make money. I had a place to live, food on the table, no bills. So my growing up, which is all middle class people do. The kids don't have to do much. They are living at home. So it wasn't until my later teens. I just wanted to make my own money. That's why I got involved with things like that.
Okay. When you start to get involved, what are you doing to? I know you're fighting, obviously, but the mafia is you've got to be both. You got to be either a killer or a racketeer, and so
Or you
kind
could
of
be both.
be both.
Yeah.
What was your introduction, may I say? To
I think the violence got me noticed by the mafia guys.
Yeah.
And so they seen that we were a wild bunch of young Italians growing up in Western Mass, Springfield. And so they right away take a notice of you, like these kids are violent. They want us type of kids around them. They don't want us disrespecting them, but they want us around them in case they need us to do violence for them. And then, so that put me on notice. I got caught with a gun shooting case in 1990. I went to jail for 5 years. I got a 5-year sentence. So right away I'm carrying a gun. I'm a violent kid. I'm what they're looking for. And then I learned the ways to make money on the streets, because at the end of the day, it's all about making money. You want to make money. Money is the power. I don't care what business you're in, mafia, legitimate business, money is power. So I wanted to make my own money, and that's when, I dabbled in taking sports action, betting sports, doing small level crimes in my late teens, but I really got big in the when I came home from prison in 1991. That's when I kind of like blew up in the marijuana industry and on the streets.
Okay. When you're growing up, you're getting into the marijuana. Now, drugs are a no in that life.
In the mafia life, right?
That's
right.
kind of like I use quotation marks, like
Yeah.
It's like you shouldn't.
They turn their face.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do it. They don't tell you where the money, but they're involved in it. Some guys are strict. Some guys will kill you if you were involved with drugs.
Really?
Yeah, they will. But for the most part, there's a lot of broke gangsters, and they don't care where the money's coming in.
Yeah. And what year was this, if you don't mind?
So I started with the drugs like in the late 80s, but when I got heavily involved in the marijuana distributorship, it was when I came home in 1991.
Okay.
That's when I learned about, I got schooled by old timers that was in prison, Irish, Italians, and they told me, certain crimes to get involved with less risk of going to prison. Like in Mass, you could get caught with 50 pounds of marijuana, and 50 pounds of marijuana. And if it wasn't in a school zone, it was a misdemeanor. So you didn't go to prison. And so like when you're in and back then it was crack, cocaine started coming out.
The epidemic, yeah.
The epidemic of crack. Heroin was a big thing. They were going after coke guys with the crack and all that type of stuff. They didn't care about marijuana. So you're selling all this marijuana. You're risking no time to go in prison. And they didn't realize the amounts of money that you can make off of selling marijuana. Like all my crew and all my friends and all my associates, they were doing all kinds of things. And I'm selling marijuana. And I'm like, oh, he's selling marijuana. He ain't making shit on that, because they didn't know the business.
If you what on a week basis back then, what were you making?
So
roughly,
just
the marijuana.
Yeah. So my first deal when I started buying it from Boston, Mass, from connections that I made in prison, and I think I was paying like $2,800 for a pound, selling it for like $3,300, making $500 a pound.
Okay.
But obviously they were charging me way too much. It was my first interactions with the marijuana. And I got so big in it that all the connections I made in Boston, and I started selling back to them because I was dealing with Jamaicans and Colombians and Spanish, the Latinos and the blacks and every ethnic group that you could think of. When it came to marijuana, I don't care who you were, I approached you. I didn't care if you were a lawyer, a fireman, a cop. I would try to sell to you marijuana because it was a slap on the wrist thing. I mean, no one's looking to set up nobody for the marijuana. So I would, listen, I've made $470,000 in one day on a marijuana deal. And that was like nothing. Like I made, like you got to look at it like this. I would get a load of 300 pounds.
Okay.
I'm making like say 500 a pound. So I'm making 50,000. That's 150,000. I would off that 300 pounds in like one day.
We'll edit that out.
So, so you're talking 300 pounds, 150,000 in 3 days. And so that would take me 2 hours to move 300 pounds.
Wow. Well, I mean, because, my followers know I was in the dope game, and I was more of a user than a seller. So, so you started off, and you kind of became a distro at one time. When you say you were kind of like a distributor at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was a big marijuana distributor,
okay.
And I was involved in the cocaine business. I don't call myself a cocaine dealer. I was but I, I knew the major people in the cocaine business. So if I had a guy that sold, I would get I would sell like 2 kilos a month. I would buy a kilo, make it 2. We had a waiter, we can, mix it and cut it and do all that. And I had a couple of guys that I would just give a kilo to him once a month. And I don't consider that even big, but I would still sell a couple of kilos a month.
But you mean give? They had to pay you for it, right?
Well, yeah, but I fronted everybody.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's how it is at
I
that
fronted,
level.
Yeah. Somebody wanted, 100 pounds of pot, and I was selling it, say, 1,000 a pound, so it's 100,000.
Yeah.
They give me 20,000 down, they owe me 80.
80 grand.
You know what I mean? I would just collect it, every few days or week, whatever, and then until they needed more. And that's just how I ran my business. I made millionaires out of so many people in this area by doing that because, like if a guy was selling 5 pounds a week, I'd give him like 30 pounds. I mean, you're selling 5. I'm not going to give you 5 next Monday and 5 the next Monday. I'll just give you 20, 30 pounds.
Here's 5, yeah.
Right, so like, and then you owe me all this money. You don't ask me for no more pot. I'll see you next month for, like if a guy's doing 50 pounds, I'll give him 200 pounds. So that's how I treated the marijuana business, and I fronted all this. I had guys that owed me 200,000, 150,000, 100,000, and I would just, get it as they sold it and was coming in. I would get that.
And you were never worried about them saying, "Hey, fuck you."
I never got beat by one person
kidding.
ever like that. And I think that goes back to the days like when I said growing up, you build a reputation.
Yeah.
So I had a violent reputation. I had a reputation of carrying a gun, using a gun, being able to. I would shoot you if I had to. So if it came to that level, they didn't probably want to see it come to that level. So I got paid. I don't have a story I could tell you where a guy didn't pay me for marijuana. Yeah,
because
and I've done that to people. Like I've had people where we took down for marijuana, and it's not like I did that because I'm a believer that when you make money, you're better off. Instead of beating a guy for 100,000, you could make probably 3 million with the guy in a year. But these guys want to rob a guy for 40 pounds of marijuana, make a quick $150,000 score. But if you worked with the guy, you could have probably made 30,000 a week for however long. So I was a believer in doing business like that until somebody would try to cross me. Once they try to cross me, then it was a fair game. Don't get mad at me that I robbed you for 300,000 in marijuana. You try to rob me in 300,000 in a stock deal. So now we're in the marijuana business. You try to get over me on a stock deal. It didn't fall through because I was too sharp for you. But now I rob you for $300,000 in marijuana. Now you're all mad. You want to kill me. You want to have people come up from New York and try to shoot me. But that didn't work out, you know. But these are all true stories.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I look at that because, you know, I have a past with drugs, and I used to tell people, not at that scale,
Yeah.
you know, but as an addict, you know, there was a guy, you know, Big Herb, we used to call him, and he was a brother, and, you know, he's a big heroin, you know, trafficker, in our area, like I said, wasn't selling no fucking kilos, but, I mean, you know, bricks, you know, he used to sell bricks of heroin.
Sure.
And I know a guy one time that was an addict that said, hey, I'm going to go in, and I know where he leaves his shit, and I'm going to rob him. And I said, well, you're an idiot. Because number one, you know, he has people, you know, and number two, he's the only, everybody gets their supply from this guy. So when you go and rob him, where are you going to go to get your stuff? And then I associate with you, where am I going to be able to go and get my shit out?
Sure.
And, you know, and that, you know, and it didn't work out. So you're doing this. Are you, you know, as with the mafia, they would label you, and I don't want to mispronounce, but vouch for somebody, hey, he's with me, put you on record. Were you on record at this time making all that money?
I got on record in 1991.
Okay. So I was born.
Okay. So, yeah, you're a young dude. So
Yeah.
I got on record in 1991, and when I got on record, I was told they don't fuck around with drugs. But I never listened to them. You know, that's just how I was. I didn't like authority. I didn't like people telling me what to do, and I did my own thing. And they told me not to mess around in drugs, and I still messed around with drugs. So, and all that money that I made in the drugs, and most of my rackets my whole life, I kept for myself. And I made my crew, and I say my crew, my friends, the guys that were associates of me. If you were my friend and you sold marijuana, you're not my crew. Me and you were friends, and we're just, you know, I might buy the marijuana from you. Business relationship. So that's basically what it was, and we all made millions and millions of dollars, and the mob had nothing to do with it. And of course, they get mad and they get jealous, and they, you know, like the haters would go back to them and say, you know, Anthony's fucking around with marijuana, or he's selling drugs. They consider that narcotics, you know. And they come and they call me in for a sit down. And they go, we hear stories that you're fucking around with the drugs. I said, whoever's telling you that, bring them in front of my face. They would never come in front of my face, and they never had proof. Like, how they gonna ever have proof? They knew that I was messing around with the drugs. It's just they couldn't prove it until I ended up getting caught in 1996.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. I got caught with, like, they raided my house. They found me with around 40 pounds of powder.
And that was with an informant, right?
Yeah, informant set me up. Turns out that the informant that set me up was double dealing. He was, like, you know, telling his handler or whatever he was on people so that they would give him information to keep him on the street, because he was a big coke dealer. He ends up getting caught by the state police, a different organization, and he's facing, you know, like 20 years in prison. I'm only facing, they caught me with 40 pounds. I was going to get probation, misdemeanor. Yeah, I was in district court. It was laughable.
That's crazy.
Yeah, my lawyer's there, and they're using like 3 DAs against my lawyer because they couldn't indict me. If I spit on somebody back then, they would have indicted me up to superior court, but they couldn't. So he ends up getting arrested twice, cocaine, gun charges, school zones, everything, looking at 40 years in prison. So I ended up getting my case dismissed because he was a rogue, dirty informant. So I beat that case in '98. That's when I came back around, because I was shelved. Al Bruno the mafia was mad at me because I got caught with the marijuana. You know, so they wanted to kill me. They were like, you know, you're dealing drugs. I'm a proposed member of the mafia. You know, they thinking Bruno's involved, so he's mad. He wants to kill me. So all this stuff is going on. But when I beat the case, I was like, yeah, I'm innocent. I didn't, you know, look at it. I'm found not guilty. So I came back around in 1998, and that's when I started getting bigger in organized crime. Even though, you know, I was huge as a street guy on the streets, and meeting all kinds of mobsters, and meeting all kinds of made guys doing business with made mobsters that were involved in the marijuana business. I was doing business with all them. So, you know, they saying, like, you guys they call it chase. You chased me, shelved me. They shelved me, like, banished
tell
me.
our viewers what.
Yeah, like they shelf, like you're banished. I can't come in. The restaurant here is owned by mafia. I can't come here.
Okay.
You're friends with mafia. I can't come here. I can't hang around with you. Nobody can hang around with me. So, that it means like you're banished from the networking of the mafia, which they couldn't do that to me because I was so powerful and strong and had so many powerful connections and associates that, you know, I always went out of state anyways. I always was going to Connecticut, I was going to New York, Boston, Providence, I was going everywhere else. So it's like my network reached out so many different ways, and then I met so many different associates of other mob families in the marijuana. I was meeting captains in the Banana family, underbosses in the Gambino family, you know, like just Geneves crime family members I was meeting. So all they did was they took the heat off me by hanging around with the heat that was here in Springfield, and it allowed me to excel at my businesses to make it more thriving. And I made millions of dollars and made more connections.
Okay. So you eventually get made.
Yep, 2003.
2003, you get made, and that's kind of, you know, but you were still interacting, you know, because I wanted to, you know, ask you, you know, this, you know, the Geneves family was well known in New York, and you know, did you ever get to meet the, you know, the?
No, I never.
You know,
Well,
I do that.
His
I'm
family.
Not, his family. You know,
I was at his family's houses.
Okay.
I was at his family's restaurants, Mario Giganti's restaurant.
Yeah.
El Molino, White Plains, and so. I was at all their houses because Bruno used to load up a van at Christmas time with like 50,000 worth of gifts, you know, like Louis XIII cognac, you know, Opus One wines, all kinds of meats, cigars, and so he would give it to the top guys in New York.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to do it, you know, because no money ever went down there, but he did it because, and he always told me, he goes, Anthony, even if I'm gone or wherever, make sure you keep doing this, you know, send this shit down to New York, you know, because that was like a nice gesture to keep, you know, relationships up with New York.
Because what the viewers don't know, and we'll school them here, the Geneves family, you know, was in New York, but you were a faction of them in New England. So you, to do anything, you know, like a murder or anything, correct me if I'm wrong, they had to okay it, correct?
So when it came to murder, when it came to structuring who's going to be, so New York is the base, the Geneves crime family. They got a faction in New Jersey, they got a faction in Florida, they got a faction in Springfield, Western Mass. Okay, Worcester, Mass, that area, right?
Okay.
Central Mass, Western Mass, and Connecticut.
Was that, so is there two factions, and one in Central Mass, one in
No,
Western?
no.
So you had it all?
So outside of New York, whoever the captain is, which is the boss.
The boss, yeah. You
so
were
like,
a captain.
But I'm a boss.
But you're a boss.
Because when they label you outside of New York, I'm a boss of Connecticut and Mass.
Okay.
Just like Bruno was, just like Skyball Shibeli was, just like Babish Shibeli was, just like Anthony DeLabo was, just like Big Nose Sam Kafari was. So those guys are labeled bosses, and they are bosses. Now, they report if there's an issue, like you just said, murder, yes, they have to have permission to make new guys into the family, and they have to have permission to kill someone. You know, you can't kill anybody without permission. So New York was there to settle all that, you know, to get in there and to say, okay, yeah, you can kill him. Yeah, we'll give you permission to kill him. Okay. And things like that. But no money went down there.
No money went.
No money.
So all the money you guys made, you kept.
All these guys were multi-millionaires. I mean,
shit.
You can't believe the millions and millions and millions of dollars these guys made. The old timers here that were here
Back in the day, like
and
Big
back,
Nose
even
Sam,
up till when I was here.
Is it, how do I say it? Shibeli?
Shibeli, yeah.
Shibeli,
like even
like
when I was around, me and my crew were making millions. So just can you imagine what they were making from the 40s, 30s, and 20s all the way up until when I took over in 03. I mean, but even though in the 80s I started making big money. You know, I became a millionaire in the mid 90s.
How old were you when you?
20. I came out of prison in 93 in debt, living at my family's house, $100,000 in debt to my father. That was in 93. Okay. And I was a millionaire, paid my father back, and I was a millionaire by 97.
Did he know you got back into the life?
Yeah, but they didn't know what I did.
Okay,
Nobody knew what I did. My wife didn't know. My kid, my family, nobody knew. Nobody. I didn't go back home and say, "Oh yeah, I'm selling a lot of marijuana," or you know, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They didn't know what I did until I started hitting the newspapers heavily in, you know, when the murder started happening.
Like a light
once the violence happened, then they're reading the papers. I'm a mafia boss.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I didn't go home and say, "Hey, you know, I'm in the mafia," and things like that. You know,
yeah.
and when I was around the mafia and when I wasn't around the mafia, I still lived the same way. I'm living the same way now, and I'm not in the mafia.
Yeah.
So here we are. We're having a nice dinner, and we're gonna eat and drink and smoke cigars and all that stuff. That's what I did when I was in the mafia, and that's what I did before I was in the mafia, and that's what I'm doing now. So it's just the way I live.
You were not a Gotti. You weren't advertising it on Front Street.
No, I was portrayed as a Gotti, but I wasn't. You know, I
Well,
was.
I read that. I actually read that.
Yeah. I was like
That
I was
you
a
were the-
John Gotti.
You were the New England John Gotti.
Yeah, I was. I was the New England John Gotti, but I didn't like the attention like he liked. Like, you know, I love doing everything he liked. I go out to dinner 6 nights a week. I love womanizing. I love you know gambling. I love smoking cigars. I love eating good food and drinking. You know, but I didn't want people to know. Like, if I saw a cop there, I would turn this way. If they were driving that way, I looked this way. If I would try to shun, the limelight when it came to that. And that's why I went out of town a lot. Yeah.
Were you driven or did you drive?
I drove, yeah.
Like
a lot of times one time I had an expedition that could fit 8 people in it.
Yeah.
And I used to go out and with, 8 of my guys.
Yeah.
Sometimes I had a girl with me, so sometimes I would sit way in the back and I have a guy drive, but he wasn't my driver. I love driving.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, when we
you
used to
see
go
it in the movies and
yeah,
shit
I never
like
had
that.
a driver.
I didn't know if it was actually portrayed.
I actually like driving myself. I'm a wheelman, so I love driving.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, speaking of Gotti, I got to ask. I have the same birthday as him, and we kind of.
Yeah.
I know you met him, right?
I never met John.
You never got to meet John. No. Did you ever get to meet anybody in his crew? I mean, I know you
Yeah,
met Sammy after, but I mean,
after
in the life.
Sammy. So I met a lot of Gambino guys. I met the boss at one time. So when I started going down, I think it was before I was made.
Gotti died when you were made, right?
Yeah, Gotti died in he died in 2000, but he was taken off the streets in 90.
Yeah.
And we all looked up to Gotti.
Yeah.
Gotti was if you're
I do.
If you're if you're a wild kid and you're Italian, who else you gonna idolize? You know what I mean? Like I'm Italian
my
mafia,
grandfather,
and the mafia was strong back then.
Very strong. My grandfather's last name was Marzoni, and they were Italian. And when I was like 8, 9 years old, I'd walk into his office and he had a picture of Gotti. It was painted and whatnot. And I asked my grandfather, who's that guy? And my grandfather's from Italian, and he said, that's John Gotti, a man amongst many men.
Yeah.
And he starts telling me,
how could you not love him?
Yeah.
I was in Florida when he killed Castellano.
No shit.
Yeah, my uncle was coming back with like 5 kilos of coke. We got arrested in Maryland. So I was with him. I was like, a young kid, And so Gotti murders this guy, Castellano. And that's, the people don't realize how big the mafia was.
Back then, you guys had everything.
Yeah, so it's like Gotti kills this guy, Castellano. It's probably the highest profile murder ever. And so my murder that we did here, not my murder,
we're gonna
but
talk about that. We're gonna
was
talk
that
about-
it was just as high profile outside of New York.
Yeah.
Al Bruno was known nationally. That's why I try to say people don't realize
it's happened here in Mass.
what's going on in Connecticut, Mass, Central Mass, Worcester, and Springfield.
Shit went down here.
We have notorious gangsters to come out of these areas. Mad Hatter, old school, multi-millionaire gangsters that are ruthless, just like the New York. I've been in jail with all the New York gangsters, and you can't tell me that there were any different. The difference is bigger cities, bigger
attention,
more numbers.
More numbers,
when it came down, and that's where it all comes down to. New York, but
the
New York, they all fought each other.
Yeah.
Like if you talk to the Bronx guys, they hate the Brooklyn guys, and the Brooklyn guys hate the Manhattan guys, and the Queens guys hate those guys. So what it all comes down to, we're our own crew too, just like that.
Well, so I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in high school, guidance counselor was like, hey, if you could be anything, what was it? And I knew about the mafia. I'm a historian, I guess you could call me. And I said, well, if there was one thing, I wish that my father would have been Italian. And
yeah, you would be doing life.
They said, why? And I said, because I'd want to be in the mafia.
Yeah, and you'd be doing life for that.
And the guidance counselor said, so you think you're a fucking murderer? And I said, no, but I'm a racketeer, but it was the attention. It was the seeing a guy.
They're going to come to you one day, though, like you could be a racketeer, but you're still going to have to pull the trigger.
Right.
The only reason, the guys that don't end up having to pull the trigger is because they had powerful fathers that would protect them from doing that, so they wouldn't have them actually involved in the murder.
And then I looked in the mirror and heard stories about prison. I said, this face is too fucking pretty to go to prison. I'm not going to prison.
There you go. No. Listen, prison, listen, I did well in prison, and prison's a great place once you're there to improve your life and take advantage of your health and your your mind and things like that. But who the fuck wants to go to prison? Dude?
Yeah,
Come on.
it was.
I mean, like you do. If you're there, you have no choice. So you're gonna make the best of it, right?
Exactly.
Read the self-help books, the philosophy, all the spiritual books. Not to become a god, preacher, but to learn about the universe and things about your inner self that you don't have no, you never knew before, because I'm back out here in the life, and life goes too quick. You don't have time to read self-help books.
No.
I was reading them 10 hours a day. I was on the treadmill reading James Allen philosophy books while I'm on the treadmill while I'm in prison. And then what else are you going to do? You're reading. You have the time, right? So,
well, let's go
go
back in. So you get made, and you're living your life. You're coming up, and there happens to be a guy by the name of John Bologna.
Oh,
that
destroyed us all.
Interferes with your life.
Right.
I mean, I've researched you a little bit, not as much as I've want, but
Mm-hmm.
anyway. So, tell our viewers, what he was like a cancer into the family, and this led to the murder and all that. So, will you take us through that?
So I think if John Bologna doesn't come involved in the Springfield, never gets introduced to Springfield.
So Bologna comes in, and let me ask you this: if he never comes into your life,
right?
Are you and I sitting here today talking?
I think that if Bologna never comes up to Springfield and gets involved in my life, I don't even know if I'm going to become a made member. That's number one. Yeah. Because, don't forget, they really pushed me to get made, and I had to go shoot a guy 9 times in New York City to get made.
Yeah, union guy.
Right, union guy.
See, I researched a little bit. I mean...
Oh, right. So, but now if John Bologna is not involved...
Shot him in the ass, right?
No, I shot him in the head 9 times.
I'm just fucking... I'm breaking balls.
You're talking about Gotti. You're talking about Gotti.
Yeah, I'm breaking balls.
Gotti shot the union guy in the ass. But
I thought every mafia guy had to shoot a union guy in the ass. I thought that was like the...
No, this guy was in the head. I don't know how he, would survive. It was like 9 shots in the head. So, from the neck up.
No shit.
Yeah, from here up. He got shot all up here. In fact, the bullets are still in him. 1 or 2 of them. So, anyways... If he doesn't come up, he caused all the greed, the treachery, and all the inner fighting. There's always going to be inner fighting.
Yeah.
All right. But this guy beefs on him. This guy's like, he's getting a little dementia. Let's replace him as boss. This guy's womanizing too much, or he's drinking too much. There's always little shit like that.
Because they want the next spot up, right?
They want the next spot. But when this guy came up, him and Artie Nigro, the boss that made me in New York, the guy I shot the union guy for. He's the guy that pricked my finger. They wanted to take control over our area. Okay. And for the first time ever, they wanted the money to go to New York and go that route. Because, the boss is in New York, Geneves Family. Artie became boss, and he's got this piece of garbage, Bologna around him. And so...
Artie's in New York or Mass?
New York.
Okay.
Artie, he's the Geneves boss.
For the chin.
No, well, not for the chin, but they were using a panel, so he became one of the bosses.
One of the bosses, okay.
So they're trying to funnel all the money and steal from, and then get made guys that are here that had partners with lucrative strip clubs and things like that. They're trying to take those associates away from made guys and funnel them to New York. So when John Bologna come up, that's what it all became. It became Bruno was the boss. Let's take Bruno down, strip him of his rank, make him a soldier, and then prop somebody else that's going to be a puppet to them. Which it was going to. I was the boss, but they were going to prop up this other guy as a lightning rod for the feds. But they thought that they could control me, but they couldn't. So they were propping up the wrong guy. So regardless of whatever, like all my rackets, I kept for myself. Did I keep what Bruno was doing? Bruno was sending them, I think, like $15,000 a month, something like that, with the extortions.
And that's little money with what you guys were making.
We're making it just off the extortions, like $50,000-$60,000 a month. So Bruno was sending them like $12,000-$15,000 of it. When I took over, I was sending them $6,000. So my incomes went up, and what I sent down there went down. And so that just, they try to make a sucker out of our area. I saw that coming. Bruno never saw it coming. It was too late. They were trying to, abuse Bruno and make a sucker out of him. And really, they're the pieces of shit that, did everything, And so if I don't meet John Bologna, I don't know how everything turns out. I couldn't even predict it. Maybe I end up dead. Maybe Bruno kills me. you know, because he was the boss. So, you know, you don't know how. I couldn't even predict. It was so crazy and volatile that you can't like say, you know, I had a vicious crew around me. So I couldn't even predict anything like that, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't even know if I would have been made.
Yeah.
I don't even know if
Yeah.
maybe, you know, because we killed people without permission. So it wasn't even like I needed the mafia to kill. You know, we were going to do that on our own. So it was like, yeah, who knows? Maybe I end up dead.
So what happens with you and Bruno, you guys, that you and, you know, all that arcades?
Me and Bruno were close the whole time. And, you know, like what happened with Bruno was New York guys, because of Bologna, they wanted to take over the area. So they wanted to get Bruno out of the way.
Yeah.
They robbed him for $250,000. You know, come on. You don't do that to another mafia boss. You know, one boss robbing another boss.
That's right.
They're lowlifes. I don't care what anybody says and whatever anybody looking and this and that. You know, those guys were scum. They tried to come in and take over our area, and they made a sucker out of Bruno. Tried to rob him for $250, and don't forget, nothing was going to happen. They were just going to, you know, replace him. And then some documents came out with him talking to a Fed. They used that as a way now to let's kill him.
Did he know the guy was a Fed or no?
Yeah, he knew.
Oh,
but
he knew?
Yeah, he was talking to him not even 2 minutes down the road.
No shit.
At Red Rose Pizzeria, yeah.
Was he kind of going to cooperate?
Yeah, he was just, you know, bullshitting with the guy. Like, hey, you know, you're an agent, hey, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Small talk.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to those agents, they might ask you a question. And, you know, for whatever reason, he answered it. And the guy put it in a 302.
302, yeah.
And it surfaced. And, you know, that's the reason why Al Bruno got killed.
Yeah. And does the mafia have people on the inside, even at the Fed level, you know, that would surface, or how do you find that?
I would say they have more like friends. So, for instance, like, say, you know, like Bulger and Connolly.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so Connolly knew him as a young kid.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens. As the mobsters get older, you know, they get more experienced, more knowledge and wisdom. They're not, you know, they're more of a businessman, you know, as you get into your 60s and 70s. And you grew up with a lot of guys.
Agents,
and then those guys, no, just friends.
Friends, yeah.
And those friends might have a son that's an agent or a state trooper or a U.S. Marshal. So their sons, you know, because it's, you know, it's all like, you know, close community.
Yeah.
They might say, hey, Dad, you know, your friend who's a mafia guy, you know, just tell him to be careful. He's hanging around with a, you know, they're watching him for this. Yeah. And that's how they get people.
It gets out,
Like, was it corruption like Whitey Bulger and the FBI there? No, I don't. I think that does exist, you know, and I think it did exist throughout, and I think it exists not just with organized crime. I think it exists in society. I mean, you know, just look at politics and see how, you know, corruption exists. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't think.
Because Bruno's son was in the car with you after the murder.
After the murder, yeah.
And something.
He got a call by the state trooper.
Yeah,
and he said, "Oh, it's the state police. They might tell me who killed my father."
Yeah.
And he was in the car with me, the two brothers, Freddie and Ty, and another guy. I think it was Antonio Vetrano. I forgot who else was in the car with us, but it was us three for sure.
Yeah.
And we killed
you guys
other people.
Yeah.
You know, so everybody knew we killed Gary Westerman. So when it came out, when he's on the phone, I see his face in the rearview mirror. I see his face go white, and I was like, and he gets off the phone, and I go, he goes, Aunt, can you pull over? He goes, let me out. And we weren't like, you know, we're around anywhere. And I go, I go, what'd they say? He said, the same people that killed Gary Westerman killed my father. Now everybody knew we killed Gary Westerman. So he knew that he was in the car with his father's killers.
And he thought he was maybe next.
No, he didn't think he was next, but, you know, he just was in the car with his father's killers.
I mean,
you know, so
I try to process
and
that.
It wasn't that we were his father's killers. You know, yes, I participated and I pled guilty, but we weren't his father's killers. New York was his father's killers. Artie Nigro and John Bologna, and, you know, because of the paperwork that came out in Emilio Fusco's discovery, you know, those were his killers. That's who killed him. You know, so if you got enemies and that paper surfaces, now they got ammunition. They go, look, okay, well, that's a killable offense. Kill him. I never got told to kill him.
Yeah.
The other guy that brought the paper down got told to kill him, but he just said he couldn't do it.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's just
it's too bad, you know. It's like, you know,
I mean, I say that, you know, I was a young kid, that's what I wanted to do, and then you tell a story like that, that's like, fuck. I mean, I just don't know if I could, you know, I'm in the car and somebody kills my grandfather, father, and I mean, it's
listen,
that life, though.
The
I
mafia,
guess.
it's like, you know, everybody says that if it was my father, I would have killed. Like, if it was my father, I'm going to tell you right now, I would have killed him. But you still have to live it. Who are you going to kill? There was so many people involved. You're going to kill all the mafia, then you're going to throw your life away, and then you're going to go to prison. So it's like, you know, everyone can say they were going to do this and going to do that until you're in those shoes. Like, even like, you know, doing a life sentence. Everyone says I would never cooperate.
Right, until
you know
life.
what I'm saying? Wait until you get the life sentence. Then tell me what you're going to do once you get it.
If you got a story to tell and you want it to be heard, reach out to us. Link in the description. Thank you, and see you at the top.
Rappers mad cause they know a nigga got bars. Yeah, I got bars. Rockstar, lil' mama, yeah, she bad in a hot car. Drinking lean off the act, yeah, she pop bars.